Government is facing resistance in its quest to replace the power distribution services. The concession agreement with the company was terminated after its demand guarantees didn't check out. In the move to replace them in a timely manner, the government has told its U.S. partners that it would prefer a restricted tender process. The decision, however, remains the prerogative of the U.S. partners, Millennium Challenge Corporation. Earlier on the Super Morning Show, energy expert Kwame Jantwa and minority spokesman on energy John Jinapo agreed that the decision taken by the current government has landed the energy sector in more trouble, hence a need for a second look. The two also oppose the restrictive tendering.
That technical arm is headed by the gentleman who was at ECG. Well, I'll get a name for you. I'll get a name. So they do the technical work. And what the board do is to handle the policy aspect of it. And so in constituting the board, there was a deliberate decision to do that. But clearly, my brother, where we find ourselves, it's a serious situation. And let no one play it lightly. It's a very serious situation.
I'm very curious myself about this letter that you mentioned, because there's no reference made to a letter from MIDA detailing specific requests from the Finance Ministry or anyone else who was at that meeting. Mr. Damwa, can you confirm that there was any such letter written?
From where to where?
From MCC to the, to Ghana.
Well, what I can say to that is that, what I know, or what my brief states, is that this letter that we have before us, which was authored by the Finance Minister, was indeed authored by the Finance Minister. I cannot speak to any other thing.
Was there a letter?
What do you mean by
is it a response to a letter?
This letter is dated October 18th.
I'm not
addressed to Honorable Ken Oforiatta and signed by Chie Kim.
Chie Kim. Well,
Chie Kim, Principal Deputy Vice President, Department of Compact Operations. This is the letter I'm referring to.
So read it to us.
What does it say?
Please. Let me
read it to us. Maybe you're using it for your press conference later. But
as I said, the General Secretary will be speaking.
Okay, so give us snippets from it so that at least.
Oh, Uncle, we'll talk. You know me, and we share a lot of information.
Okay, you give it to me. I'll take a break. It's 25 minutes past 8. This is still the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 FM. Things are heating up in the studio. Dr. Charles Rekubobe is with us on the phone lines. Dr. Rekubobe, initially, would you say that all of this happened because we were too fast to act, like Mr. Jinapo was saying earlier?
Well,
I absolutely agree. I think this has given us a second chance to sit and ask ourselves, can we do this thing here? What is the real basis of this whole thing? To be able to restructure the management of ECG so that they become super efficient. Can we do it in country? Look, we did Ghana Commercial Bank, didn't we? We did ADB, didn't we?
Goil.
We did GOIL, didn't we? Were all these three, did they have external influence? Did they have external influence? They didn't. So I think we should sit and think to ourselves, do we have the capacity in country to be able to restructure ECG? Do we? Now, well, if we look at what has happened with these other companies that I have mentioned, that possibility is that we need to exert ourselves to see whether it is possible for us to do. And for me, I think it is possible for us to do. If we put our mind to it, we can do it. We could do it.
Mr. Jinapo, when your government was in power, we wanted 80% of audit.
And so when he speaks, he settles the matter. And for me, he settled the matter. The truth is that we took a decision that a minimum of 20% Ghanaian ownership. We knew all these challenges. That's why we took that decision. The MPP came and they insisted that a minimum of 51. The most important thing is that it's the outcomes that tell you whether the decision was right or not. Bear in mind, once you announce the 51, the tier 1 companies pulled out, the tier 2 companies pulled out. And so you were left with Miracle, which is a tier 3 company. It's not a tier 1 company, it's not a tier 2 company. MIDA, after the RFQ, categorized these companies in terms of their strength. And the composition was a 60% financial, a 40% technical in evaluating them. And so Miracle was placed in tier 3. But when you announced that the tier 1 and tier 2 companies pulled out, and eventually you even disqualified BXC, so you were left with just Miracle. And so the question for us is that, following the decisions taken, where have we landed? And we find ourselves in this quagmire. We find ourselves in this situation. And so clearly, I leave that for viewers to judge.
Wow. I asked the question, Daniel, when are we going to get technical know-how and financial know-how? He rightly said, this thing has been going on for the past 35 years. When are we going to start getting the right technical and the right financial might in here? Now, if we've been able to spend $4 billion for the banking crisis, does that not tell us if we are very, very key, we can raise the money here? Where did that $4 billion come from? Or is the $4 billion paper money?
But that was government. We are talking about private sector capacity.
Whatever the case is, we need a situation where there is no distinction, there's no clear distinction, government and private sector. If government can help private sector to stand on its feet, they should do it. Other countries have done it. And I'll give you a typical example of Trinidad and Tobago. And Trinidad and Tobago discovered oil and gas. They wanted to build oil equipment in Trinidad. This was 1967. The Americans told them, you can't do it. You don't have the capacity. You won't be able to do it. You don't have the wherewithal. The president then said, we can do it. And this is what he did. He gave concession to all their people who were working in the oil industry around the world, brought them back, gave them good pay, and got them to start an industry in Trinidad and Tobago. Today, Trinidad and Tobago manufacture Christmas trees for the big companies. So I ask myself the question, when are we going to do it? Because it's not only focused in the electricity sector. It's in all other sectors. Look at it today. Even look at our textile industry. Look at our roads. We've got Chinese people coming in. Look at our gold. We have Chinese people coming. When are we going to build capacity? So my suggestion is that we all need to sit around the table, and say, how do we create the kind of institutions that would help the private sector work? Now we have the free trade zone. If we don't take care, Ghana would see itself in the bottom.
Wow.
Because Ethiopia and Kenya right now are moving very fast to make sure they have the wherewithal. What are we doing? The fact that the free trade zone office is based in Ghana is neither here nor there. We need to be able to build the human resource, which is the most important natural resource you have.
Very important points there, Mr. Jinapo. But you were shaking your head at a point.
Yeah. You see, let's not confuse the issues. It's not as if because of a 400 million, we must rush to take a decision. Even without money, without the 400 million.
I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we should rush to take a decision. I'm saying, how do we build our own? I'm not in agreement of this short term. For me, if for nothing at all, the compact is running for the next 2 years, we should have enough time. And I'm not in favor of this restricted tender. Let's have the open tender, making sure that we cross all the T's and dot all the I's.
So, Mr.
going forward.
So, Mr. Jantua, let's allow Mr. Jinapo to.
I'm virtually agreeing with you. What I'm saying is that with or without the compact, we have all underscored the fact that there needed to be some reforms within ECG. ECG's current liability. Yes, the power sector largely. Even the whole nation, we keep reforming. We can't be. Today don't do politics. We need to reform this government. I don't want to do politics today. Let's get to the opposition needs a lot. It's okay. Let's not do politics. ECG's current liabilities is about 7.7 billion. Their current asset is about 5.2 billion. So there's a net negative working capital of 2 billion. No company would survive with that kind of situation, because you might be big, you might be 22 billion, But then the immediate thing that comes is your working capital. You must meet your short-term obligations and all that. And then going forward, gearing and all that. So there's a problem. And so the most important thing is that could we have done this thing better? That is what we should be learning from. And that's why I agree with him. And I'm saying that we're not arguing that this so-called short-circuit process of restrictive tender might even prove to be worse. And so that's why I said, let's step back. Now, the other thing about the 51 or 21, the results is there for you to see. Because one, if you talk of the technical capacity, what they did is that immediately after forming the SPV, PDS has turned around to sign a TSA agreement with Miracle. And Miracle is paid monthly. So the consortium itself, after assuming ECG, is turned around to sign a technical support agreement. That was not made public to us. Then for Miracle to then produce that. So Dr. Rekubrobe at a point in time was even proposing that. Then why don't we terminate it and probably get Miracle, if it's their technical capacity, to sign a TSA with them with ECG and give them the benchmarks. Number two is that even the financial, they couldn't meet that obligation too. Because it's clear that even the premium, they had to come around, recycle ECG's cash flows to pay for that. So both on the technical and the financial aspect, all of them have proven to be incompetent. So I'm saying that, look, learning from this, we must exercise caution. Let's build consensus, let's step back, and let us adopt an approach and a program that will serve this country and that will serve the interest of ECG. And overall objective should be aimed at bringing about efficiency. Because when you take the annual revenue requirement, ECG was getting $18 million per month. PDS has been giving 23 to 25 million.
Speaking on the same program, the Chief Policy Analyst for the Ghana Institute of Public Policy Options, Dr. Charles Rekubrobe, said the energy sector should be more important than personal interest and how government has handled the situation so far.
I think somewhere along the line, certain things were changed, which made us rush things unduly. The injection of the change from a 20% local interest to 51%, which effectively drove away the interest of many of the people who were interested in the whole process. And having been bitten by making so much haste, I do not think we should go along doing things in so much haste, simply because we are bound by some artificial deadline of somebody who wants to be generous to us. Let me remind everybody, over the last 2 years, the government of Ghana, without anybody's prompting, has committed and spent what is equivalent to almost $4 billion restructuring our banks. So I don't think that decisions that we should take concerning our power sector should really be driven by 498 million as somebody has committed to us. I believe that the energy sector of Ghana is more important, or as important as the banking sector. And if we committed $4 billion without anybody pushing us, we should, first of all, define what's in the best interest of Ghana's power sector, what it costs to effect those actions. And then, if we can fit it within the compact, by all means, let's not look a good horse in the mouth. But this whole thing of people thinking that we have to satisfy an external deadline because there's 500 million going away, I don't really see the point. After all, Mr. Addison, who has spent $4 billion of our money, is now chairman of the board of governors. It shows that people have confidence in him and have confidence in decisions taken by ourselves. So let's start off by saying, going forward, what lessons have we learned? How should the lessons inform private sector participation?
And this is the story of the PDS so far. The government of Ghana in 2014 commenced efforts to access a second Millennium Challenge Compact, christened the Ghana Power Compact. And this would see Ghana receive $498.2 million from the Millennium Challenge Corporation of the United States to advance economic growth and reduce poverty in Ghana. It was also to see private participation in the management of Ghana's debt-ridden energy sector. The Millennium Development Authority is the supervising agency of the compact. The John Mahama government announced the decision to enter into a concession agreement where a private company would take over management of the largest power distributor in the southern part of the country, the Electricity Company of Ghana. The announcement was, however, met with resistance despite strenuous clarification and explanation by the government that the strategic national asset was being privatized. In September 2016, MEDA announced that it had shortlisted 6 out of the over 60 companies that had expressed interest. The companies are Manila Electric Company from the Philippines, CH Group, EDF SA, LMI Holdings, Veolia SA with Ghanaian address, NG Energy Services SA from France, BXC Company Limited, Zhaosheng Technology Stock Company Limited, registered and operating in Ghana, NLSPA from Italy, and Tata Power Company Limited from India. The government in January 2017 announced it had negotiated an amendment of the shareholding structure to ensure that Ghanaians hold the majority stake in the company, which is 51%. MEDA, which was responsible for selecting a successful bid, settled on the Filipino company Manila Electric Company. On July 24, 2018, Parliament approved the concession agreement between the government and consortium led by the Manila Electric Company, which is Meralco. The shareholding structure of the successful consortium was constituted as follows: Manila Electric, which is Meralco of the Philippines, 30%, Energia SA Angola owned 19%, Santa Baron Ventures in Ghana 13%, TG Energy Solution Ghana 18%, GTS Engineering Ghana Limited 10%, and TBK Ghana Limited 10%. These companies formed a consortium known as Power Distribution Service. One of the conditions precedent for concession to take off was converted into a concession subsequent, and this was the demand guarantee. Now, the purpose of a demand guarantee is to ensure that whenever the concessionaire fails to honor its financial obligations, ECG can draw from the funds lodged with an insurer by the private company. Government in July announced suspension of the deal, saying that demand guarantee submitted was fraudulent. An investigative team led by Interior Minister Ambrose Derry was dispatched to Qatar, and government on October 18th wrote to the Millennium Challenge Compact informing it of its plans to terminate the compact and find new private sector partners using restrictive tendering. And that has been the PDS story so far. We continue to follow it and see how that goes.